Hello and welcome to the Focusing Way podcast. I'm your host, David Battistella. Please share this podcast with others as a way of introducing them to the people, themes, concepts, and beauty of focusing. Our website is thefocusingway.com. Follow us on Twitter at The Focusing Way. This podcast is available on iTunes and Stitcher. Our philosophy is simple: focusing for better living. If you really enjoy this, you can support us by making a contribution via Patreon as well. All the links are on the website. Now, on to the good stuff. Today on the Focusing Way podcast, Changes Groups with Dr. Kathy McGuire. Changes. That single word stuttered at us by David Bowie in his hallmark song Changes, piped into my ears and hit me. Perhaps like a lot of other people, it hit me directly. I was one of those listeners, feeling like the world and everything around me was changing at a pace I could not really handle, and now someone else was, through his music, telling it back to me, letting me know that they were feeling it too. With a guitar and a microphone, he suddenly was telling everybody what he was feeling and what we as a collective were feeling at the same time. A sense of community formed around the ideas in that song. They were the stars and we were fans, and together we knew something everyone else could not quite grasp. Now I know you all want to hear the song now, but I can only play you 7 seconds without infringing copyright, so here's a little refresher. Yes. Well, changes were happening before that song was released, and it was at the University of Chicago where a group of Dr. Gene Genlin's psychology students needed a place to work out some things. They began meeting to discuss the changes going on around them, and these early changes groups evolved as a formal focusing practice. A community formed, and that community began working with focusing in a group setting. These groups were called changes groups. One of the people who was right there and will describe her experiences is Dr. Kathy McGuire, who was a student of Dr. Eugene Gendlin at the time. Dr. Kathy McGuire got a PhD in clinical psychology from the University of Chicago, working directly with Dr. Eugene Gendlin. She was a focusing-oriented therapist and workshop facilitator for 40 years. Her many articles and manuals can be found at her website for Creative Edge Focusing, cefocusing.com. As a co-founder of the original Changes Listening Focusing community in 1971, Dr. McGuire sees empathic listening and experiential focusing as co-equal skills. From her experience, a Changes community is a training laboratory in how to live in community, how to overcome prejudice, and increase tolerance for difference and uniqueness. People can practice not only focusing, but interpersonal conflict resolution and group decision-making using listening focusing skills. And now, part 2 of our conversation on changes groups with Dr. Kathy McGuire. I really want to ask you, how important it is to be grasped or to be understood, and what that really means for you in focusing partnership.
Okay. So I'm going to close my eyes and sense in a little here to find my my new, fresh words for that. So to be grasped, the I-thou experience.
Mm-hmm.
So in my way of focusing, which comes out of my experience in the original changes group, where we really were doing empathic listening while the person paid attention inside.
Mm-hmm.
I often start out with a lot of words about this vague sensing that I'm having, or
Okay.
maybe some images. And then the other person says that back. And I just feel, being the kind of person that I am, which is a very relational kind of a person, that I go so much more deeply. I get to really deep levels, which often involve being touched or moved to tears by what I find. It's like it really enables me to go into what Jen called frozen holes,
Mm-hmm.
really stuck parts of my living that are not very accessible. And
Mm-hmm.
somehow to have that other person, maybe they see things or they find a nuance or an image, and they say it back, not just my parroted words, but they're hearing and capturing kind of the deeper nuance. And so it comes back to me and it's like, wow, it's like, that is exactly right. I didn't use those words, but that is exactly right. So I just think it allows me to go really deeply. And having that outer listener also, I have a 10-year long focusing partnership, and we know each other's patterns. And so having that outer person can also, maybe in a focusing way, and I have instructions on my manual how to do this and go immediately back to listening. But my partner can sometimes say, well, you're right in this spot, Kathy, where I'm noticing you always seem to shy away there.
Mm.
Would you be willing to just stop and sense into what that is? So that outer person is going to see things, well, like as a therapist does, but in this safe self-help relationship
Mm-hmm.
that I might never see myself. So it just, I just think it helps me see myself more clearly by being seen through the eyes of another. You could try to say some of that back just to demonstrate what that's like. With a lot of words. So part of being a listener is you're not God. You just do the best you can and get what you can, and so you
Mm-hmm.
can whatever you got from that.
Well, for me, as I'm experiencing what you're saying and hearing you, it's that sense that being heard at a level that someone sort of knows you, but also they may discover something that you can't see in yourself, and they can provide a window into something where you might not actually be able to see out that window, but they could sort of just open the blind a little bit to allow you to stop and pause and take a moment with something that otherwise might be a blind spot for you, for lack of a better term. That experience can take you into very touching moments, but also help you experience what it's like to be with another human being in this kind of an interaction, which further deepens the process for you.
Yes, and it's at those deepest levels. It is a very spiritual thing. The focuser who goes deeply becomes revealed. It makes me think, when I was a Catholic child, I had these holy cards of Jesus, the Sacred Heart.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Jesus, but in the middle of it was his glowing, beating heart.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that when you have a really deep listening, focusing turn. The person is able to let down, let open, manifest, because they're feeling so unjudged and accepted. So the person becomes revealed, and the listener gets to see the person revealed in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And the listeners often move to tears as well. And there's this that's again that I thou experience of deep bonding. When I've been in a changes group with people, and
Mm-hmm.
we've had those experiences, that group, we're bonded together forever. And even if we've moved away and don't see each other, when we come upon each other again, we're just, that deep connection is there because we've seen that innermost uniqueness. I always think of it as a person is like a multifaceted jewel.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do empathic listening, the different facets of that glowing jewel become revealed. And I guess the focuser, it becomes self-compassionate or self-empathic
Mm-hmm.
with that revealed part, which maybe is like an inner child, or that's just one symbol for it. But it's like the focuser and the listener are both seeing the focuser's essence revealed in some way. And that bonds people together. They want to take care of each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a timelessness to that bond. It's often in my very best friendships, after we've spent some time together, I've learned to say to them when we're saying goodbye, the next time we see each other, this will feel like yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
There's that kind of quality to the depth of focusing relationship that you're talking about. It's a bonding that's at a human level, at a very sort of a level of sort of witnessing. Another word I like to use, it's like what an honor it is to
Yes.
witness someone's process, to be present
Yes.
to that. It's like, and you brought a sort of a spiritual component into it, and there is a kind of a inner, and there's a bowing down. It almost sort of, you can almost sort of dip your head down to that, just to honor the wholeness and the beauty of situations like that. And anyone who's been in any kind of focusing practice for any length of time can sort of, if I've been in meditation practices where you touch on very beautiful things, but there's this aspect which I'm really enjoying in our conversation, and that is the human condition, which involves other human beings, which involves community and this being together and taking care of one another. And we've evolved into this sort of divided kind of idea. And,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that's our true nature, because as we do more and more focusing, those kinds of things fall away, and we can appreciate human beings and people in a new kind of evolutionary way that's different from maybe how we were raised or our experiences to this point.
And I think you have hit the nail on the head. You found the perfect words, that through the empathic listening and focusing process, we come to see each person's uniqueness, but we also become united in our common humanness. That's maybe the beating heart of that Jesus card, or that essence you get to in a deep turn, is you resonate to each other's essential humanness. The person is unique, but you also see whatever their life experience and yours, we are humans in this together. And that's really what we need in this world.
Mm-hmm.
So you really pointed to an essence. And I want to say, I don't know how much longer we're going to go on, but I want to give people an idea, like you talk about your focusing way of living in
Mm-hmm.
the world,
Mm-hmm.
just even trying to make eye contact. There's a very simple thing which I do now in my life more than ever, given the horrible experience of the election in the United States and the arguing that went on these television panels. I won't put up with it anymore. So at the simplest level, in all my interactions with family and friends, I start by saying, I would like us to go around and have equal, uninterrupted turns to just say how we are or what we think about this issue.
Mm-hmm.
And just stopping interrupting that competitive, aggressive way and allowing each person to know they're going to speak without being cut off allows people to start to speak in a focusing way. They don't know focusing, but because they're not going to be interrupted, they start to center in and to speak not their sound bites, but their more authentic experiencing. So just stopping interruptions already allows that kind of connection. And then a second thing is you can go to Edwin Rush's website, cultureofempathy.com, and find there one-page simple instructions for how to start an empathy circle.
Mm.
So anybody can do this, and it's one step further than my just stop interrupting. You just your job, you just get a group of people, one other person or three people or four people, and go around in a circle. Each person has a chance to be the speaker, and the person next to them is the listener, and their simple job is to just try to say back what they're hearing. And the speaker's job is to just keep saying, well, it's not quite that, it's more like this, until the speaker feels heard.
Mm.
And then you go on to the next person. Again, you're not teaching gentleman's focusing, which makes that whole process deeper, but you have given people a skill they can use when they get into these arguments, which are now so common about politics and religion and gender. And it's a skill that everybody needs to learn
Mm-hmm.
in school. And it's something that everyday people can learn to offer to each other. It doesn't take even 10 classes to begin to do it. So just giving a nudge in that direction. And again, on my website in the store, people can download my manual for $5 and learn how to start a listening, focusing support group and community, and how to resolve their conflicts, make decisions, and make a better world. We have these tools.
That was what I was sort of going toward here with this. With one other question I had was just about, how the way in your manual and how you've structured teaching people how to create changes communities. How do you feel that changes communities are opportunities for real community growth and understanding?
Okay, and I have to acknowledge that although I've probably started 10 listening, focusing communities myself, which have been the backbone of my own living and my own support system and how I meet people when I go to a new town, but my manual does not seem to have allowed people to do that, or people aren't emboldened enough or something. I really thought, I'll just write this manual and then everybody will do this.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to go in my life and do other things, marriage and parenting, and which distracted me from making that my own mission, I guess, or something. So I don't think I think it's something about people feeling emboldened that
Mm-hmm.
they can do it. But a main way that changes groups start now is that people do take a 10-week class from a certified focusing trainer, and then are maybe encouraged or decide on their own to continue that format in a self-help way. So then they just start to gather and check in, say how their week has been or whatever, and then break up to exchange focusing turns. So what I do that's different when I start a group is I see it as the changes group as a laboratory for practicing not just listening and focusing, but also interpersonal conflict resolution and group decision making. So if I'm leading a changes group that's going to be a self-help group, I look for instances of conflict, even the tiniest little conflict. And I say, oh, let's stop right there and practice our listening, focusing, conflict resolution skills. So let's take turns, equal turns, each person reflecting the other, or sometimes let's have a third person as a listening facilitator. These things are all in my manual. But I look for those opportunities in the group. And every meeting, we do some kind of consensual decision making, even if it's just about who's going to lead the group that day or who's going to bring snacks. There's always something. And so you're practicing those skills so that, number one, when you really need them, you know them. And number two, so you can take them out into your other work and living situations. So I think that's where I'm different and my manual is different from most of the changes groups that go on these days. I guess the part about looking for conflict. What I hear about the changes groups, the way they're going these days, is if someone doesn't fit in to that particular group, they just quietly go away. They just stop coming. Or sometimes there are more really clashes, and people have not really learned to automatically apply their listening, focusing skills to those conflicts. So often it ends up people going away, people starting their own group that's more their own way. And I guess you can survive that way, but I don't think we're developing our skills to the highest that we can bring into the world and help the world, which is filled with conflicts where people can't walk away. You can't just say, oh, go start your own country or whatever.
Right.
So that's the difference. And I guess that's why I wanted to do this with you, is to really make that point. I mean, I'm 72 years old, maybe just recently, and not likely to be the one that can make this a worldwide revolution. But I always thought 40 years ago when we had the original changes that there would be a changes community in every town, just like there are 12-step groups, many 12-step groups in every town, and that would always be a place where people could learn and practice these skills. And so personally, I'm a little distressed that the direction has moved, from my point of view, with a greater stress upon being able to do focusing alone, which is a great thing. I'm just saying it seems maybe to have happened at the expense of emphasis upon the empathic listening.
Or a community-based model.
Experience, and the community being not just a group, but a place where people acknowledge their conflicts, stay together, work them through, learn tolerance, and use empathic listening and focusing as their powerful tools for doing that, and bring that out into the world. So I appreciate you giving me this chance to make that point. They're just two different things.
Yeah.
There's personal growth being a purpose, even for a changes group, and there's community building as a purpose. And they're just different activities, which hopefully can happen together as well.
At some point, I wrote something called Is Focusing Your Little Secret? And that may have come out of this sort of idea of like, oh, I've got this great thing that I do and it makes me feel really good and I'm improving as a human being. And, is that the point? Like, should I not be taking this out to a broader community, to my friends, to my family, to even just that tight a group? And in speaking with you, I'm sort of getting why I had that sense, because there's also something in me that's wanting the focusing community to be wider, like for a changes group, like for people to sort of, university students in any city. I think there are 85 universities represented in the city I live in now. And is there something like this? No. Was it here when I got here? No. Might it be something that happens here in the future? Very inspired after our conversation today.
And people can find through Edwin Rush's work at cultureofempathy.com, where there's a networking. There are people, they don't talk about focusing, and maybe they don't know focusing, but they're really into empathic listening. So there's a group called Sidewalk Talk, where therapists volunteer time to just stand on the sidewalk and listen to whoever needs listening. There's a group in England, the Listening Movement, I think it's called, the Listening Cafes, where people hold listening cafes, which would be like the empathy circles I described. So I think it's important for focusing, as you say, to broaden out and connect with other people who are doing similar things, and help them add the focusing piece. So it's hopeful to be reminded there are a lot of people out there trying to work on empathic understanding now, given the great rifts in our cultures, and maybe we can find those people. In the United States, there are all these indivisible groups that have arisen after the tearing apart of the election. And one could go to an indivisible group and introduce empathy and focusing. So there's a lot of possibilities out there. And I guess I'd say, if people would take my manual and find one other person, and then maybe a third person, and maybe a fourth person, that little support group they would start out with would be their backbone, their way to defuse what happens and to strengthen each other as they go out into the world. I mean, then you could bring it everywhere, to schools, like in schools, teachers need support for the difficult work they do. And then in schools, gosh, every child from the beginning can be taught how to listen to another person. You can just do that in a classroom. Just go around in a circle and take turns. It's so simple to me.
And also eventually teach others how they want to be heard, to also ensure that they're being understood, which is another aspect of this kind of way of being, where as you learn, you can always check that you're being heard with the person that you're speaking with, that they're actually hearing you. And that's something I think a lot of people experience, a feeling of not being heard, of not being listened to, of not being understood, and just improving these skills,
And that when you use focusing yourself, you come to know yourself, and you become emboldened to stand up for yourself. I think that's part of what you're saying. It's not all about giving and taking care of other people. It's a mutual thing. You are also mutually being heard and seen, and using focusing to stand up for yourself, to find out who you are and what you need and what your next steps are. And that's where the focusing really empowers you to, as you say, go out in the world and be a force for yourself.
Yeah.
As well as the world. And that was part of the original changes. We wanted to be more authentic people, to not be wearing our masks and social facades, and just be authentic people, and then see what happens in the world. So again, just appreciating your giving this platform.
There's a beautiful, for those of you, I encourage you all to go to the Creative Edge Focusing website. And there's a beautiful quote that I found today, or sometime earlier this week, and I'd like to read it. And this is from the website. Every individual is born with a unique blueprint. Personal growth is the unfolding of this blueprint. Every problem holds within itself the exact next steps needed for solution. The sight of new insights and creative solutions is at the edge of what is already known. This edge, the creative edge, holds implicit within it all past and future knowing about the problem, more than could ever be put into words in any linear way. The creative edge is a right brain phenomenon, and it's physically experienced as the murky, intuitive feel of the whole issue. I encourage anyone listening to dive into that murky, intuitive feel part of yourself. Even if anyone who hasn't focused closes their eyes or doesn't, or just takes a breath and just checks in, there's probably something there worth exploring.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Thank you for quoting that and for your great insight there.
Thank you so much for your time today. I'm so happy to meet you in this way. I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to share your experiences with the wider, as this audience hopefully grows. And I just really, really appreciate you taking the time to share and to be with me in this way.
And I hope people can see, as I feel it, that you and I, David, are now intimately connected because we've spoken in this real way and listened to each other. And it's phenomenal.
Yeah, it truly is. Thank you so much.
And thank you.
You've been listening to the Focusing Way podcast. Our podcast is available on iTunes and Stitcher. For links and to subscribe, visit our website at thefocusingway.com. Follow us on Twitter at thefocusingway. Please share this podcast with others as a way of introducing them to the people, themes, concepts, and beauty of focusing. If you really enjoy this and want to support us, you can support us using Patreon as well. Until next time, I'm your host, David Battistella.